All right. Well, uh, hello, J Car. Uh, so there's a link to what I'm gonna be talking about tonight in terms of the Freecano, and it has a few images that we will be going over. And my name is Dominic Green. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I do film, photography, and I write as well. I'm glad to see everybody here this evening. Um, and if everyone can go to the page Journey to Freedom, we can go ahead and get started. Let me know if you have any problems with the link, anything like that. So, in the portrait on Journey to Freedom, that was a portrait that I took about end of 2016. I had just finished reading this book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. And it really inspired me to understand what blackness is in America. What blackness is in terms of how we are perceived by people outside of ourselves, and how we kind of have no control of our bodies in a way. We have our bodies are very fragile in the essence of how we've been utilized throughout this country. So within this portrait, I took a image of a noose hanging around a young man's neck, and I thought that was just very powerful in terms of he's not being hung by it, but it's almost as if he's walking away from the past pain and he's walking towards his freedom. Again, that's why the piece is called Journey to Freedom. And actually, today is Washington, D.C. Emancipation Day, when Lincoln freed more than 3,000 slaves on April 16th, 1862, in Washington, D.C. And some of the slaves are just so happy to uh, telling the whole DC area, which was really amazing to, especially if you've been in bondage for so long. And there's a article about the Emancipation Day that's actually on the uh, well, it's a link below the Emancipation Day, and it refers to everything that they have known to happen, and it's so amazing to me that Barrett set this today on April 16th, which is Emancipation Day for DC, and we're able to talk about our identities and how ethnocide has destroyed cultures, but has left the people standing. So to me, the when I created this image, I was writing a short film called. It was originally called Three Fifths of a Man, and we ended up changing it to the black body because I felt like that was more symbolic because there are so many people that are brown, red, yellow, black, every color under the rainbow, and I felt like we could discuss the fragility of the black body throughout that piece. And later on, I'll put a link to a trailer of that film if people want to see that. Thank you, J. Carr. Uh, so we'll go to the next slide, and I call these the healers. I took these images during my residency at the Nicholson Project just a few months ago. It's still on display, but due to COVID-19, people aren't able to see it right now. But if you go to the link that's on the second link that's on the page, you'll be able to see the Nicholson Project and see we at least had the gallery opening event, which was really awesome. A lot of people came, and you were able to experience the identity of people, because it's called perception times agency, and you were able to see, um, in my mind, what superheroes are like, and not so much the superheroes you see on um, like television, like every day, like X-Men or anything. Thank you, Sherry. On X-Men or anything like that. I kind of wanted to go away from that and go back to uh, like ancient African folk tales, if I could say that. And I think it was very interesting, and I think it was very cool. The whole display was like, so these two images, the whole display was wisdom. So I call them the healers because uh, the people that tell you stories of your lineage or give you a way to know where you come from can make you so much stronger. And now that's why I put the second point, strong family narratives, because the griots or the storytellers in the family, they help you know the ups and the downs of being a part of a family and being in your specific family or tribe. And I think that's so amazing to me because many of us don't know where we've come from. And in terms of ethnocide, that's kind of the reason why we don't know where we come from, along with the Atlantic slave trade and everything like that. It's just we don't really know where we belong. And people have kind of used that to weaken. Uh, yeah, good point, J. Carr. Stories make you feel more rooted in your identity. Exactly. People make you feel like you don't have a place in the world. And for me, having these two basically storytellers wrapped in these kind of, it's not like tatters, but it's like a robe in essence, and it showcases that you need these people as much as we have moved forward and and you know, hey, how you doing?
I didn't really. Sorry.
You're fine. Do you have any questions or anything?
No, I think this is incredible, but you could continue and I'll jump in.
Oh, okay. All right. If anybody else wants to join, feel free. I'm really just talking and just discussing my work, and I think having family narratives and knowing of a history. That's why I put a New York Times article by Bruce Feiler. It came out in like 2013, and it was talking about the family stories that bind us. And it was also mentioned in this book that I have, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome, um, which is a really great read, by the way. It helps us to understand who we are. Yep. Yep. Okay. Oh, the author is Dr. Joy. Uh, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but
Okay.
it's a really great read. It's a really great read. And that's a part of me creating this art, learning how to tell stories, and that's why my Nicholson project collection was called Perception Times Agency. We have to learn about people before we make these judgments because we're quick to make rash judgments about how people look, how people talk, how people act, and we really don't know the backstory about many people. Um, like, you have anything or?
I that you really spoke to storytelling and how my friend and I were both on here together and we were just talking about how it's truly been like a lost form, storytelling within the
Mm-hmm.
family. Um, and how important it is to carry that on, even though we think of it as kind of like back in the day, or a old,
Right.
old school tradition. But even today, with so much information that is easily accessible online, it is still very important for us to tell our own narratives within our family, because there is so much information out there. There's also a lot of misinformation. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important to keep your truths alive through storytelling. And
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
I love this. I hate that I can't go to the Nicholson exhibit, but thank you for sharing this with us.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. I just think is for me, I think it's important that we, uh, especially during this time of quarantine, you talk to your family and get to know who you are, because this is like the only time like everything's on pause and you can actually learn. I know the stories may be painful, for a lot of, especially people of color and things like that, it may be very painful, but it's time to tell those stories and let you know that you have a heritage that is much greater than what you're shown on mass media. So, you know, that's why I created that at the Nicholson Project. And I'm gonna go to the next slide, the magical Negro. um, for me, and actually, she was on this call a little earlier. Her name's Raquel. She's the model in the photo. For me, we were trying to create. She had two characters, and this was one of the characters. If you go on the Nicholson website, you'll see her other character. She's dressed in like a Matrix type of outfit. Uh, she looks like she belongs in the Matrix movies. But for me, this image that she's in, and she's also a wonderful storyteller. She's also a movie maker. But for me, in this imagery, we wanted to showcase something that was regal, but also you kind of didn't know what she was. Um, it's the printed image is a lot darker, in terms of, so it only looks like she's surrounded in stars. And for us, we wanted to make it so that she was kind of mystical and magical in a way, but not in the negative way that is portrayed a lot throughout films. So like we get lost in the narrative of the magical Negro. Like in a lot of films, say something like The Green Mile, Michael Clark Duncan comes in and he comes and helps out, or uh, what's another, like Driving Miss Daisy or things like that, where black people aren't, they're dehumanized, which I've also put some article about being dehumanized, how there's a superhumanization of black people and by white people. We are beyond what they think we are, which is true in many instances, but in the way that it's talked about is it's negative, because they remove your humanity and create this whole narrative that you kind of don't exist other than a reason but to be the help. And we wanted to remove that. And she, for me, she looked very regal, and she looked uh, very much like a mother presence. And I thought that was very interesting because I guess, I don't know, for me, I like a whole mother nature thing and everything like that. So I feel like uh, that's something she represented. She represented the cosmos, and and we just enjoyed that whole thing, and it was really cool. Um, but the question that I asked on the slide was, does the lack of human interaction lead to mythical thoughts about other races and cultures of people? And I thought that was very interesting because I think it does. Like, same thing when people talk about sci-fi stuff and aliens. Uh, because it's unknown to you or it's foreign to you, you make this whole story in your mind of what it is and what it really isn't, because you've never come into contact with whatever you're thinking about, really, or you're being shown. Like, I know there are a lot of, people that don't interact with other cultures because they've never left their neighborhood, or they've never left really their block. But in meeting those people, you remove a lot of the social stigmas that are placed upon those people, and then you find out, like, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was. And I think that's something that's needs to happen more often. We need to come into contact with other people, because that exposure leads to your mind expanding. And I think that's really interesting, an interesting dynamic of how your mind expands because of exposure. And a lot of us have a lack of it, I feel.
I think art is avenue for that type of exposure that you're talking about. Art, literature. But you're so right. I love these poignant questions that you're asking. Like, it really, it's so thought provoking, and it takes it just further, and it really gets me to start thinking about just socially how I move about, and these
Mm-hmm.
notions that I may have in my head, all stemming from this picture of this woman in all black. So I appreciate your questions.
Thank you. um, and I will uh, go to the next slide, let the bars down. So, uh, in this image, it was really a young lady. She had a garment on that had a bunch of tassels on it. And on the tassels, she kind of made it like it was like jail bars in a way, but she's kind of breaking through, so they're not closed, so you can still see her face as she's like escaping through it. At least that's my interpretation of it. Other people can see it another way, but that's what I was going for when we were shooting. And I asked the question, "What's your Evtopia? What's your good place?" Uh, I know for me, my good place is uh, a place where people can just converse and share ideas and share thoughts. They don't have to all be from the same place. They get to learn one another and kind of immerse yourself in other worlds. We get so trapped and fixated in a particular world that we grew up in that we never, again, back to my point, we never exposed, and that lack of exposure doesn't allow our minds to expand. So a good place for me, it doesn't have to be perfect, because no place is really perfect, because it's not, as Barrett has said in his descriptions on his website. It's not a perfect place, like Sir Thomas More put in his book, but it's a place where people can join together and realize that we all have come from a similar place. And I think COVID-19 is kind of showcasing that more than ever. We all can get sick, and we all can be touched by uh, this virus, and it allows you to see that you are more than what you just put into a box. I feel like we're so boxed in and categorized about everything that we do. Um, when sometimes you need to go from uh, your box and kind of expand it a little bit. Go talk to other people. Go break from your mental prison. I'll say that. I'll say that we should break from our mental prisons and enjoy life and enjoy one another. I think that's something that we really don't do. I don't know everybody, but I feel like people don't do that as often as maybe as we used to as technology moves forward, because we become more separated physically. Um, Thanks, Lauren. Thank you. Um, and I asked another question: do we block the creation of our good places? Uh, I know I myself have, in terms of allowing fear or my own anxieties about what a good place could be or what my good place is. And I feel like people do that often. We self sabotage because our current place feels comfortable, it's known. Um, and I think the way to unblock it again is kind of you change the mind, you change what you do. And many people before me have said that. And in my art, I like to, as Lauren put it, make people lean in and ask questions and get to know what's behind this. What is this? Because at the end of the day, everybody should be searching for knowledge of something, whether it's yourself, whether it's, I guess, your job, your, you know, if you have a religious affiliation or whatever. I think you want to know more, and in that knowing more, you can be more helpful to others and be more helpful to yourself. I read what Rennie Cole said. This piece speaks loudly because of the COVID and the high number of blacks lacking proper health care, high number of blacks dying in the community and in the jail system. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that we are we are caged in a way, and we have been historically. At least I'm not going to say African Americans or Freecanos now. Um, we have been put in this place of where we're stripped of our freedoms, I'll say. And and I agree with you wholeheartedly about the COVID. It's kind of shining a light on a lot of the things that we still don't have, and we've been here for 400 plus years, and we still trying to catch up, I guess. Um, and my final question on this slide is: how do we change the minds of the following generations? Um, I feel that we can change the minds of the following generations by speaking to them. Going back to my slide with the healers, telling them the stories of us, telling them the stories of our families, telling them the stories of who we once were, the ups and the downs. I feel like a lot of times we get caught up with we want to just tell the highs, but in telling the lows, you know that life isn't just a bunch of highs, it ebbs and flows. And the only way that we can change those opinions or those minds is by getting to them young. I was reading a book called the Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, um, and it discussed getting to children before the age of um, before the age of like 9, before they reach fourth grade, because in fourth grade we, especially black boys, our minds shift. We go from being more left brain to more right brain and being more active, passing down general. Yes, I agree. Passing down the generational wealth and legacy, not just the money. The wealth is the stories and the history. I agree, um, and I think that's something that we should all do. If you have a young person in your life, reach them early because other people are reaching them before you do, and maybe telling them lies about who they are or lies about what they could be when they are much greater than. And I'll go to the next slide because I think I'm running out of time. My next slide is called "What Does It Look Like?" It's two images for me of different representations of whether it's black fashion, black anything like that. I really enjoyed that. And my first question of that was, what represents your place in the world? And for me, uh, what represents my place in the world, I feel, is my art. And thinking about philosophy, thinking about religion, thinking about spirituality, thinking about money, thinking about all these things, and just thinking about a world, um, and trying to discover what makes this world go. For me, that's what I represent, and that's why I create art, to understand these things, to understand where do I fit in the grand scheme of things. Because I know a lot of us may feel displaced, and that's one thing that uh, Barrett is showing with Freecano and ethnocide and Evtopia. He's showing that through ethnocide we've been culturally displaced, and being culturally displaced has harmed us more than we ever know, because I feel like a lot of times it's very covert. We don't realize we're being culturally displaced because it's not something, it's not just stripping away everything that you have immediately. And things that happen gradually you don't pay attention to, I feel, as much, versus something that has an immediate impact. We all pay attention to things that, like a loud car crash, we pay attention to that. But like, I'll use another car metaphor, like you won't realize that like your brakes are wearing down every day on your car, because it's like uh because it's something that you're not paying attention to. It's something that's happening every day, every time you get into your vehicle, but you're not thinking about, oh, okay, and you're not thinking about, uh, one day I'm gonna need new brakes. Not when you first get it, but, and I feel like that's the same thing that happens with our cultures. We have our cultures, and then throughout time, slowly things will get stripped away piece by piece, and you'll realize it after it's too late. And but for me, in these images, it's, I feel like gold teeth are part of like uh, black culture here. And I like the 70s look, because I felt like the 60s and the 70s was a time of fighting back, fighting against the oppressors, fighting against the the powers that be, so to speak. Um, and I just felt like it was really cool. I felt like it was really something that is helpful. And then I asked, is it clothing, jewels, art, philosophy? And I mean, where do you think you're represented at? Whether, your sexual identity, your how you speak, where do you feel like you're represented most, or where do you feel like you're not represented at all? I think that's a question everybody can ask. Where do you feel like you're not represented at all? Because I know for me, uh, it's a mixture of all of the above. Okay, an example of how you can figure out where you're represented is, for me, it's like, where do I see myself? So I watch growing up, I watched a lot of films, and I watched a lot of old films, a lot of black and whites, and a lot of films from the 50s, 60s, 70s. And for me, the example of is, in a lot of those films, I didn't see people of color, so I never felt represented. I never felt like I could be the hero. I was reading in Dick Gregory's book, I think is the Lies of History. I can't remember the exact title, but he speaks in a portion of the book. I believe it's in the introduction, and he speaks and says that he would go to the cinema all the time, and he would see John Wayne on screen and as his cowboy, and it reminds me of Watchmen as well. I don't know if anybody has watched the Watchmen series on HBO, but he would always see the Cowboys, and they never represented him in terms of his color. Where do you see yourself, and where would you like versus? Mm, that's a good question. A good thing. So, like, where do you see yourself versus where would you like to be seen? Um, where do I see myself? I see myself in this room, in this whole exhibition. That's where I see myself really. Like Barrett and the whole SEO team have given a lot of emerging artists of color opportunity and a platform to uh, showcase their work. And I feel like other people, uh, whether we know each other personally or not, we've been given like an opportunity to speak on things that kind of guess we all speak about and all see. Um, and where I would like to be seen, um, me personally, I like to see myself in museums and movie theaters, or maybe not movie theaters because of COVID. A lot of them are closing, like AMC. But I see myself just doing what I'm doing right now, but prayerfully in contact with people, not just virtually, so we can have dialogue in person. See myself in museums and just continuing to showcase art and showcase films and showcase just ideas. My whole thing is to help people think. I feel like that's why art is here, to help people think, to showcase what we see going on, and to see a reality that a lot of us aren't looking at. For me, it's very important to see, myself in these spaces, and others that are just like me, and others that aren't like me as well, because it's always good for me, in my opinion, to have diversity of thoughts, because what you may not be thinking of, another person is. But for me to be represented is like I said, just what I'm doing right now. Um, and I'll go to, I think that's my last slide. And basically, my last slide is just a thank you. Um, and again, for anyone who is just joining, I'll put the link to the slide in the chat. Um, and to anyone who's just joining, but I just, I thank everybody for sitting here, and I appreciate all the patience with the technical difficulties at first. I'm glad we found a solution. And if anybody would like to talk, please get on and we can video chat, because I believe we can go until 8:45. So love to talk with you guys, see where everyone's heads at, and just see what your thoughts are.
Make sure you check out my Instagram.
Oh, and also please check out my Instagram. It's at the writing director, and I'll put it in the chat as well. Okay. Hello. All right. And if anyone has any comments or anything, you can definitely leave it in the chat. And thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for viewing the work. It was very important to me that I had this opportunity to speak, and showcase my work to a wider audience. And thank you, Topher L. Thank you for coming as well, and Zuli Brown. Thank you. I appreciate it. And let the bars down for helping future generations. We have to make sure they understand what our history was so they don't repeat it. I agree with those sentiments wholeheartedly. I think that we're going to have to talk and communicate and really just be vulnerable. I know that's not a big thing with a lot of people, to be vulnerable, because it's hard. But being vulnerable helps the people that are coming up after you, because they'll know your flaws. They know where you messed up. They'll know all these kinds of things. And that's helpful, because if I don't know that you ever messed up, I'm going to look at you as a perfect being. And I'm going to feel as if I can't live up to that. And not me personally, but I know when I was younger, I would see different celebrities or things like that, and you say, "Man, they never messed up," or just people that you know admire, and you think that they never messed up because they never spoke to you about it or anything like that, but they have. But that's why they have to be able to be vulnerable to allow you to know that there are situations that haven't always gone the right way. So I agree.
Hey, do you have opportunities to mentor young people through your art other than art galleries?
No, not me. Not yet. I've never really thought about that.
Oh,
Um,
it was just from what you were just saying and some of the things that really came forth from the portraits and the questions that you asked. I think are really good questions for maybe a young person who's really just either struggling with an identity or seeking an
mm,
identity or who they are. I think this is really good. I was just curious.
oh well, thank you. Now I have to look into that, because I've taught elementary school kids before, but never thought about a mentorship program. So I really, yeah, I like to get into that actually. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Any questions that you have? Any comments, opinions, anything?
Um, no, I think I've spoken to a lot of, anything that had come to mind. And again, I think that this is real. Your work is very poignant and thought provoking. I think the questions add another layer
Mm-hmm.
to the artwork, and it really forces you to be introspective about it
Mm-hmm.
versus just trying to interpret the art, in isolation of yourself. So that I really appreciate it.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hey,
Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Dominic, thank you so much for just sharing just your thought provoking pieces. I had a question, the magical Negro piece, and
Mhm.
just sort of your personal experience as you've displayed your photography to a wide range of audiences. Have you ever felt like you've had certain audiences or groups of people that, in the same way that Black culture and music and the arts, that sometimes it can just be consumed by other groups, but not fully connecting to our art, whether that's our music, whether that's dance? Do you find that with the subjects of your pieces that that more engagement happens in terms of with the topics, or do you feel like it's just merely kind of consumed? It's just something to be enjoyed or seen. Um,
For me, I think it's been a bit of both. There have been people that have come and just been like, "Oh, that's a really nice photo," or "That's a
yeah.
really nice piece." And in terms of like doing film stuff, that's really nice. And there are other people that, regardless of whatever culture they're a part of, they'll
Mm-hmm.
come up and they'll engage more with it. And I like to engage in more
Yeah.
because we can actually have a conversation, because they may not understand, or they may have a totally different interpretation of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that for me, it's kind of both. Some people are just like, and maybe they don't think any deeper into it or anything like that, because there also aren't questions posed with it. I
Yeah.
think to J Carr, I don't know your name, but I think to what she said, in terms of asking questions along with it, kind of help you. And for me, I know it helps me, because while I'm making the work, those are a lot of the questions that I'm asking myself. Um, how's this how is this going to be effective? What am I thinking? What am I thinking about this? What is my subject thinking about this? Because I know for me, whenever I'm shooting things, I'm having a full dialogue with whoever my subject is at the time. Because it's not just a one-way street for me. It's very much hey, what do you feel about this? I'm getting these vibes. I'm getting these ideas about this. What do you think? They may have a totally different outlook on it, but it's never us severing that outlook, because your outlook can inspire me more because I wasn't thinking that way. But yeah,
That
like I
is
said,
so
I
dope.
think it's both.
It is.
That because what you just described is your art is participatory. Like,
Yeah.
it's a conversation. I would have never known that had you said it. That you're really having a dialogue with your subjects, and then they have influence into, the meaning of it. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. That
Thank
is.
you. Yeah, very much so. I think for me, because I always have to work with other people, my art's very collaborative. So I don't want to ever just be like, this is just, nah, I have my moments, I guess, when it's like, this is what this is. But I like to hear what you have to say. Because again, it's not just, yeah, it's an idea that, maybe it come in my mind, or it may have come in somebody else's mind. And then we're trying to foster creativity, because again, I like expanding your mind. I like the exposure, because if you don't tell me what you thought, or you don't tell me what you're thinking, I'll never know. And then I'm missing an opportunity to grow, and you're also missing an opportunity to grow or teach somebody else. So
Thank you.
That's so awesome.
yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you.
And you have any more questions or comments, or?
I'm just.
So I'm really stuck on, not stuck, but I'm just really leaning in, as one of the other participants said, on the let the bars down. And in that second question, do we block the creation of our good places?
Yes.
Because here, like, oftentimes, in our communities, we are thinking that the bars have been placed on us, or, to oppress us. But are we also creating these blocks or bars for ourselves? And so I just wanted for you to elaborate a little bit more on, why did you ask that question? What made you think of that question?
What made me think of that question mainly was, again, that book I showed earlier, the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And amongst other books, another book called Black Rage, by two psychiatrists, Greer and Hobbs, I believe. In terms of mentally, we get stuck a lot of the times. We get put into this box that maybe nobody else has put on us, but because all of our outside stimuli have showcased that we are just this, that we know what we want in terms of where our good place is, or what a better version of what we're doing is, but we get stuck because it's like, I don't know if I can do that. And that's another book that I really enjoy. It's called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, where it discusses fear. I'm sorry.
Outwitting the Devil?
Yes. By Napoleon Hill, who also wrote Think and Grow Rich. You get stuck in this place of fear. And once you're afraid, you limit all your other opportunities, all your other things that you think about, because you think they're impossible. Same thing with us not interacting with people of other cultures. It's more fear-based than it is not wanting to interact, because as this whole COVID thing, you really want to interact with people, because most of us we're just stuck in the house unless you're an essential worker. And I feel like, finding a happy place, or knowing your happy place, because I feel like a lot of us, it's innate that we know where we want to be or what we want to do, but we get afraid of the unknown outcome, just like we get afraid of unknown people. And, so that's a lot of what I think about that. All right. So it looks like we're going to have to join the community remark session. And I do want to just read one last comment. It says, my concern is that for the people who don't like to think about our past and don't use their right to vote or protect to prevent from repeating in the future. And I agree with that as well. I think a lot of us don't want to think about our past because, again, it's painful. Like, a lot of us ask our parents or our grandparents things, and they don't really want to discuss it because it's painful to them. But they should, so we can know how to avoid different pitfalls and traps. But thank you all for coming. We have to go to the community remark session. I thank you both for participating with me. And I hope everybody enjoyed themselves.
Thank you. It was really,
Thank you.
It was really
Thank
great.
you.
Yes.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right.